there, tech lovers. I'm Andrea, and this is Venture Talk by Techcelerator. This show aims to provide you with strong insights on building a startup, lesson learned, success drivers, and of course, tips and tricks for you to achieve your goals. Today, we have the pleasure to dive into the regional investment landscape with Ondrej Bartos, partner at Credo Ventures. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and, of course, leave us your comments. Ondrej, thanks a lot for taking the time to have this conversation.
Thanks for having me. Hi.
We can go ahead with the questions. Ondrej, we hear quite often this story, but yours is quite unique in its way, starting out early in college, running several businesses. But the difference here is that you have decided that you don't have what it takes to run a business, and you turned to invest into the local ecosystem and, of course, then in the regional one. Having worked within and pretty much developing the ecosystem, can you talk a bit about what it was like those in the early days in Czech Republic?
It was very different. So I've been around startups and eventually venture capital for a long time. I mean, pretty much ever since the dot-com bubble in the late 90s or 2000. And the environment is completely different. It was not mainstream at all. So, not a lot of people knew about startups, starting companies with big ambitions. Almost nobody was aware of what venture capital was, at least in this region. So, when I started, I first started running sort of networking events around startups and tech business. And it was a lot about sort of education and evangelization. And that took actually quite a lot of years in this stage. If we fast forward to today, startups are very hip and sexy, and it sometimes seems that like almost everybody knows about them. Everybody has an opinion. So that's the huge jump. I think I've always believed in sort of creative minds and innovators and inventors in the region. I've always tried looking at Central Europe as opposed to just the Czech Republic, where I was born and raised. And I've always believed in, entrepreneurship in the region. It just had to, reveal itself, or, it needed some time. And I consider myself very lucky of being able to observe the sort of whole story, the whole cycle.
Mm-hmm. And you have observed it quite well, because you have discovered and invested in some unicorns, UiPath here included. But of course, all of us hear the success stories. But I was wondering, do you have some stories about the startups that maybe got away or didn't work out as expected?
I have many stories like that. It's, for every successful startup in our portfolio, you can find at least 2 or 3, which are complete failures. So I have many stories of companies that we invested in, but, they just didn't make it anywhere, either for sort of external reasons. The markets didn't evolve the way we believed they would, or they were much slower, or they evolved differently than we expected, or internal problems. The team, split, or the founders were just not strong in execution. So yeah, I have many stories like that. Let's call them sort of mistakes in investing. And then I have a bunch of stories of successful companies, successful startups that I saw had the opportunity to invest in, but I decided not to. And you know, in Romania, I mean, I've seen, you know, Druid, and I saw FinTech OS and Bunny Shell, and you know, many startups that that turn out to be doing very well that I did not invest in. That's life of an investor. I always say that being a venture capitalist is a very rewarding and great job, because you get to work with founders, which is very inspiring. But it has this downside of just not being able to do everything right. I guess I just learned to live with that.
Yeah, that's right. But what stops you from investing in a startup? I'm sure that the founders that are listening to us are very curious to hear this.
You know, it's always a combination of factors, and I would probably start from the other side. You know, what makes me invest, and I think it's fair to say that a lot of things have to fall into the right place in order for us to invest. We have to like the space that the startup is in. We have to believe that the solution to a problem is strong. We have to believe that the opportunity is big enough. We have to believe that the founders are great. They are solid executors. They can learn fast. They listen to guidance. And at the same time, we have to like them personally. I cannot imagine investing into somebody that I would consider be a schmuck. You know, that's not what you do. This is, you know, some people compare investing in startups to marriage, and I very much subscribe to that concept. I have to like the founders, and at the same time, I have to believe that they're capable of building amazing things. And if all of those things fall into the right piece, and if it's the right timing, we invest. In all other cases, we don't.
So these are a lot of great insights for the founders that are listening to us. You have also invested in a numbers of Romanian startups. And I know that you keep an eye on the local ecosystem. And I was curious if there are some differences between Czech Republic or CE region and Romania.
I mean, sure. I mean, we're not the same countries, so there are differences. You know, Romania is a little more sort of remote from the Western world. I feel like Romanians more often than Czechs think globally or think big, just because the local market is not a big one. I also feel, and I have always felt, and I started going to Romania probably around 2007, 2008. I've always felt that Romanians spoke better English than, say, Czechs or Slovaks or Hungarians. So that's a good thing. But there are, I would say there are differences, but there are so many more similarities. We share similar or same historical experience or geopolitical experience. I feel like all of Central Europe is well known for the technical talent, for its engineers, programmers, developers. Cybersecurity is something that we have in common. You know, Central Europe has been a home of the largest, greatest antivirus companies. So I try to still think of Romania and Czech Republic and Poland as Central Europe, as a region. And I strongly believe that we're more similar than we're different.
That's good to know. And going a little bit to other geographies, I suppose that you as an investor, you are keeping an eye and looking all over the place to see what's going on. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we try.
And I was curious, what do you think about Israeli startups ecosystem and the way they have developed their ecosystem over the years?
Well, I'm not a huge expert in Israel. Obviously I've read Startup Nation, and I've been in touch with a couple of investors there. I've seen case studies, and I've followed success stories of some Israeli startups. I feel like a lot of the startup success of Israel is tightly connected to like the overall story of Israel, which is very entrepreneurial. It's definitely a nation that that has seen risks and has taken risks, and taking risks is the essence of startups. So I feel that was one of the roots or reasons. Another one might be the initial sort of support from the government, from the officials. And I don't, by support, I don't necessarily mean money, although definitely there was money flowing into venture capital and startups funding. But what I mean, or what I would consider more important, is the overall narrative that the government of Israel very early on took towards startups and taking risks and entrepreneurship. And I feel like that helped to create this DNA of Israel as a startup nation. But that's just my view.
That's right. Changing a little bit the subject, we've all seen in the last year an injection of public money that comes into local and regional VCs. Can you comment on the advantages and, of course, disadvantages of this model?
Well, I mean, the advantage and the reason why governments are doing this is that they want to sort of help ignite the startup ecosystem and the investing ecosystem or venture capital ecosystem, business angel ecosystem. And I think money can do that. I think there are pretty much even chances that money can help build an ecosystem to the chances that money can hurt the ecosystem. And I have to say that in the last years, I have not been a supporter of public money flowing into startups or venture capital, just because I believe money is not what's missing in the market. I think there's a lot of money, and money, and despite what many people say, money is pretty smart. So if they see opportunities, that's where they flow. I don't think lack of money is a problem in Romania or Czech Republic or Hungary, anywhere in Central Europe. So I would personally just prefer if the governments focus on what they actually should do, creating frameworks and laws and enforceability of law and taxes, transparent and simple taxes, rather than startup or venture capitalist support.
But do you see any particular risks with this model on the long run?
If I see particular risks, well, I mean, in some countries, what we've seen was that the governments poured too much money too quickly in markets where there was not a lot of money or a lot of investment activity. And what it did to the market in some cases was that it did not stimulate the creativity or entrepreneurship, but it just gave money to almost like everyone, no matter if they were good or bad. And that creates sort of a moral hazard. Startups are not for everyone, and not every startup should get funded, should get money. It should always be the best ones who get the money. So that's how I believe it may be a little risky.
Credo operates in a very competitive space where one side you compete heavily with other investors, but on the other side you have to coexist and sometimes co-invest in some very good opportunities. And how do you navigate in such competitive space?
We're trying, Andrea. Sometimes we're better at that, sometimes less good. I think you said it perfectly. It's venture capital is an interesting space where we have to pretty much stay friends with most of our competitors and staying in touch. And actually, I am good friends with many of my competitors, in Romania included. And at the same time, you know, we get to compete sometimes for the best deals because there's just as many of them as they are. How to do this? I would probably say that I am still looking for the right mix. I'm trying to be friendly. I'm trying to share deals. I'm trying to co-invest as much as possible. But at the same time, of course, it is my fiduciary duty to my investors to try to be in the best deals. That being said, we never know which are the best deals. But listen, I mean, you mentioned UiPath. We have co-invested in UiPath alongside Earlybird, which is another great regional fund, and with SeedCamp, which is a great European fund. We are in Typing DNA alongside Gapminder and Gradient, which is Google's venture capital fund. We invested in Ezra alongside a number of funds. So, you know, that's just the reality.
Ondrej, you know better than me, but we can say that investing is a mix of capital allocation, gut feeling, and maybe some data, and of course some data. And I was curious, how have changed your investment thesis over the time and your focus?
Well, I mean, there are two possible answers to this question. The easier one probably is that our investment thesis hasn't changed much over the 11 or 12 years we've been investing in the region. And as a big picture, that's true. I mean, we started as an early stage venture capital fund, being very bullish on Central Europe as a region, believing in creativity and entrepreneurship of people in Central Europe. And that's what we've been doing, and that's what we do right now. If we dug deeper, there are subtle details. when we launched Credo and we raised our first fund in 2010, we actually wanted to invest in Series A deals. We wanted to be a little later, and one of our assumptions was that there's going to be friends, fools, and family. There's going to be a layer of angel investors, and we would come a bit later. If I look at the market now, there's a lot more angels. There's a lot more willingness of friends, fools, and family to invest, but yet we like going in very early. We like going in pre-seed and seed rather than waiting for Series A. One of the reasons for that shift is that venture capital became much more competitive, but the main reason I'd say is that it is the very early stage that we like most, and I personally like most. I love the unveiling of the talent. I love the early discussions around, product, its positioning, its go-to-market. I love working with founders in those early stages, and I believe that's where we can add most value. And when Series A comes, I'm happy if I'm already there, and instead I help the companies to find, US investors or someone in the UK or where the markets are.
Mm-hmm. And how do you deal with the risk that is pretty specific for the early stage companies?
We just deal with it. It's so I would say it's a risk that we like to take. We in the very early stage, what matters most are the founders, timing, and sort of the space where they're heading. And those are things that we just love analyzing the most. So it is the kind of risk that we just are most willing to accept.
Mm-hmm. Last years have been quite strange, and we've seen a lot of unfortunate events that have happened. And I was curious, with all the research and analysis that you are maybe doing at Credo Ventures, where do you think that an entrepreneur could create a new market, some new opportunities?
If only I knew, Andrea, if only I knew. Well, listen, I mean, there have a 2020, 2021, and now 2022, unfortunately, seem like pretty weird years. On the other hand, the good side of all of the weird stuff happening in the past 2 years, the good side of it is that technologies sort of proved themselves again as something that can help people and companies handle crises, even unpredictable ones. So in a way, from that perspective, I love what we do and where we are. I think in technologies, in software, in the internet, in Web3, we are still at the very beginning, and there are still like amazing things to happen in technologies, and that's what I love. We can be more specific, and we can talk about future of work and how technologies can help in the 21st century, which is going to be very, very different in terms of work and workplace than the 20th century. We can talk about communication. We can talk about education and educational technologies. We can talk about Web3, but truth is, VCs are not great at sort of predicting what's going to be the next big thing. We sometimes are lucky, or smart to spot the next big things when we see them at the beginning. We usually don't predict what happens in the market.
Mm-hmm. And talking about strange events, as the conflict in Ukraine unfolds, what is the potential impact for investment sentiment startups in the SCE and CE region? What are the potential investment risks that you are exploring right now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very difficult question. I think like the easy answer is we don't know. We still don't know. It's too early, and I guess we are all just hoping and praying for the war in Ukraine to end soon. The sooner it ends, the less of an impact it will have on our lives and on our investing. I can probably imagine darker scenarios than that, but I just prefer not to think of them too much. So let's say we're just hoping for the war to end soon. I'm hoping for especially the people in Ukraine to be able to get back to their lives and their work. It is impacting all of us by the refugee crisis, which rationally might be both good and bad for Central and Eastern Europe. There might be more potential employees for startups flowing into Poland, Czech Republic, Romania. But on the other hand, we have invested in a couple of startups who have Ukrainian or Russian co-founders or employees who cannot quite focus on, building startups right now. So, again, the war should end as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. And changing a little bit the subject, the valuation of startups sort of skyrocket in the last period, and it's the same with the investments. How significant is right now 1 million ticket, and how much a founder can accomplish with this money?
Well, first of all, it depends on what they want to do, but in general, I mean, I still think $1 million is a good amount, and for a startup in very early stage, they can achieve solid things. They can validate their initial hypotheses. They can probably just bring the products to the market, or at least get to an MVP stage. I think $1 million is not a bad ticket. You're definitely right that, especially in the past couple of years, there has been sort of an inflation of investment money flowing into startups, and valuations skyrocketed indeed. I feel like this year we are heading towards some sort of a correction kind of a thing. I think valuations will decrease back to sort of healthy area, and I think this year, next year, 2023, 24, there probably will be less capital invested, deployed in startups, not only in our region, but in Europe in general. And I don't see it necessarily as a bad thing. I truly believe that the best founders and the best startups will still be able to raise money, no matter inflation, stagnation, war in the east part of Europe, and if if some of the less amazing startups won't be able to raise money anymore, it's not necessarily bad. So that would be my take. But hey, things are changing rapidly.
That's right. And I have a last question for you. I'm sure that out there are a lot of founders eager to listen to our conversation. And Credo should be on the top of their list if they're looking for an investment. And I was curious if you have any advice for those that are looking for funding right now, and maybe some particular advice for those that are trying to reach out to Credo.
I mean, reaching out to Credo is fairly easy. Just send us an email or message on other LinkedIn's or Facebook's. Just reach out and we'll get back. For the ones who want to raise now, be thoughtful before you reach out. Be really thoughtful and try to do everything you can before you address investors, because even in the optimistic times, only the best startups raise significant money, and this year seems not to be best times, so the bar might be even higher. Be very thoughtful, try to do everything, all of the research, or push to an MVP before you reach out to investors, and then try to pick the best ones you can reach. Ask other founders who have raised before, ask them about VCs, because the selection should be both ways. It should not be just the investor picking, it should be the founder picking as well.
Ondrej, thanks a lot for this insightful conversation. It was a real pleasure to have this. And for those listening to us, give us a like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and of course, leave us a comment. Who would you like to see in our next episode? Thanks, Ondrej.
Thank you, Andrea. Bye.